For 364 nights a year, Elena Petrova was a ghost. She haunted the graveyard shift at Sterling Medical Center, a stooped figure with graying hair pulled into a tight, unforgiving bun. Her uniform was the drab gray of the custodial staff. Her tools were a mop, a bucket of brackish water, and a squeaking cart laden with cleaning supplies. She moved with a quiet efficiency that rendered her invisible, a part of the sterile, fluorescent hum of the hospital itself. She had a slight limp, a subtle catch in her left leg that colleagues attributed to age and a lifetime of hard labor. Her hands, when she gripped the handle of her mop, had a fine tremor, a nervous flutter that the younger nurses and residents found pitiful. They saw a woman worn down by life, a relic from another country and another time, silently polishing floors while they performed miracles. They were wrong. Every single one of them was devastatingly, dangerously wrong. The epicenter of their ignorance was Dr. Julian Vance, the charismatic Ivy League-educated chief of emergency medicine. To his superiors, he was a godsend, a brilliant doctor with a photogenic smile and a talent for fundraising. To the staff under his command, he was a petty tyrant with an ego that required its own zip code. And to Elena, he was a source of constant casual cruelty. He used her as a prop for his authority. One Tuesday night, while holding court with a fawning group of residents, he'd backed into her cart, sending a half-empty bottle of industrial cleaner clattering to the floor. "For God's sake, woman, watch where you're going," he'd snapped, not a hint of apology in his voice. "You're a walking hazard." Elena had simply stooped to pick it up, her face a blank mask. "Well, don't just stare at it," Vance had continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Clean it up. It's what you're paid for. Try not to contaminate the trauma bay with whatever it is you people carry." The residents had snickered. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, ambitious and cruel in her own right, had added, "Careful with those shaky hands, Elena. We wouldn't want you to cause a chemical spill." Elena had said nothing. She had cleaned the mess, her movements precise and economical, betraying none of the silent fury coiling in her gut. She absorbed their scorn like a sponge, her silence misinterpreted as weakness, as acceptance of her station. They didn't see the way her eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, were constantly scanning, assessing. They didn't notice that her nervous glances were actually a systematic threat assessment of every person, every entry point, every piece of equipment in the room. They saw a janitor. They had no frame of reference for a warrior. The night it all changed began with the wail of distant sirens, a sound as common in the ER as the beep of a heart monitor. But this was different. The sirens didn't fade. They multiplied, a chorus of approaching doom carried on the freezing winter wind. A freak ice storm had turned the I-85 into a ribbon of black ice and twisted metal. A multi-vehicle pileup. The call had come in, mass casualty incident. Dr. Vance preened. This was his stage. "All right, people, let's look alive," he barked, striding through the ER like a general before a battle. "This is what we train for. Triage protocols in effect. Miller, Jenkins, you're with me in Trauma 1. Let's show them why Sterling is the best." Elena continued her work, wiping down a gurney, her movements calm and steady. But her senses were on high alert. She heard the frantic chatter of the paramedics, the strained reports of crush injuries, traumatic amputations, and severe head wounds. She saw a junior nurse struggle to calibrate a new ventilator, her frustration mounting. Elena paused beside her. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a soft whisper. "The pressure gauge. I think the seal is not seated correctly." The nurse, frazzled and dismissive, waved her away. "I've got it. Please, we need this area clear." Elena retreated into the shadows, but not before noticing the faint sheen of hydraulic fluid near the base of the machine. A compromised seal. Under pressure, it would fail. A fatal flaw hidden in plain sight. The first wave of victims arrived, a flood of pain and chaos that threatened to overwhelm the ER. Vance was in his element, shouting orders, delegating, a whirlwind of motion. But it was disorganized motion, a performance of competence rather than the real thing. He was triaging based on the loudest screams, not the most critical injuries. Elena watched, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. She saw a man with a sucking chest wound being tagged green, while a woman with a deceptively minor-looking head, laceration, pupils already blown, was tagged yellow. Amateur mistakes, deadly mistakes. Her hands trembled, not from age, but from a desperate primal need to intervene, an instinct honed on battlefields she could never speak of. She clenched her fists, the rough wood of the mop handle digging into her palm, and forced herself to remain a ghost. Her promise, her penance, was to stay hidden. Then came the sound that cut through the cacophony of the ER. It wasn't a siren. It was the percussive thump-thump-thump of military helicopter rotors, deafeningly close. The windows of the waiting room rattled in their frames. A fierce downdraft blasted slush and debris against the glass. Doctor. Vance looked up, his face a mask of confusion and annoyance. What in God's name is that? I didn't authorize a helipad transfer from the military. The ambulance bay doors burst open, but it wasn't paramedics who entered. It was a team of 4 United States Army Rangers clad in matte black tactical gear, their M4 rifles held at a low ready. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made the hospital's security guards look like frightened children. They formed a perimeter, their eyes scanning, assessing, securing the space. This is a secure military transport, one of them shouted, his voice a gravelly bark that commanded instant obedience. Clear a path, now! Behind them, 2 combat medics wheeled in a gurney. On it lay a man in a torn, blood-soaked dress uniform. A constellation of 4 silver stars was still visible on his collar. Impaled through his chest and into the gurney itself was a jagged piece of steel rebar, a gruesome spear pinning him to his potential deathbed. It was General Marcus Thorne, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The ER fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the ragged, gasping breaths of the general. Dr. Vance, seeing the 4 stars, saw his chance for glory. He shoved his way to the gurney. I'm Dr. Vance, chief of this department. Get him into Trauma 1 now. Let's get a CBC type and cross, portable chest x-ray. I want vitals every 5 minutes. The combat medic rattled off a report. Multiple fractures, massive internal hemorrhaging, and a flail chest. Vitals are crashing. He's got a tension pneumothorax left side. Vance barely listened. He saw the rebar, the dramatic central injury. We need to stabilize and prep for surgical removal. Get me a chest tube tray. We need to relieve the pressure. He grabbed a scalpel, his eyes alight with the thrill of such a high-stakes procedure. Sir, wait, the medic pleaded. The rebar's position is too unstable. A standard insertion could shift it and sever his aorta. I'm the doctor here, Vance snarled, high on adrenaline and arrogance. I know what I'm doing. He poised the scalpel over the general's chest, and it was in that moment, as the polished steel was about to break the skin, that the ghost found her voice. Stop. The word was not a whisper. It was a command. It was low, guttural, and vibrated with an authority that defied her gray uniform. It cut through the tension in the room like a razor. Vance froze, turning slowly. His eyes fell on Elena, who had dropped her mop. It clattered to the linoleum with a sound like a gunshot. She was standing less than 5 feet away. Her posture no longer stooped. She stood straight, her shoulders back, her chin up. The tremor in her hands was gone. They were as steady as granite. What did you say? Vance hissed, his face contorting in rage and disbelief. Security, get this woman out of my ER, now. The Rangers hesitated, their training conflicting with the scene before them. Elena Petrova took 2 steps forward, her limp barely noticeable. She ignored Vance completely, her eyes locked on the dying general. You insert that chest tube, you will kill him, she stated, her voice clipped, precise, and utterly devoid of fear. He needs a needle decompression, now. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. You're wasting time. This is insane, Vance sputtered. She's the cleaning lady. Elena's eyes, those pale, washed-out blue eyes, flicked to meet his. For the first time, Vance saw what was truly there. Not weakness, not age. He saw a chilling, absolute certainty. He saw a furnace of experience banked behind a wall of ice. She didn't wait for permission. She moved to the crash cart, her hands a blur of motion. She palmed a 14-gauge catheter, tore open an alcohol swab, and was at the general's side before anyone could react. With a surgeon's precision, she located the spot on his chest. Tell me you know what a tension pneumothorax is, doctor, she said, not as a question, but as a final, damning indictment of his incompetence. She didn't wait for an answer. She plunged the needle into the general's chest, There was a distinct hiss as trapped air escaped the pleural cavity. The general's body, which had been rigid with strain, relaxed. On the monitor, his oxygen saturation, which had been plummeting into the 70s, ticked upward. 82, 85, 90. The immediate crisis was averted. In that moment of blessed silence, General Thorne's eyelids fluttered open. His gaze, hazy with pain and morphine, swept the room. It settled on Elena. A flicker of disbelief crossed his face, followed by a wave of profound, unmistakable recognition. His lips, caked with dried blood, parted. He breathed a single word, a rasp of awe and reverence. Valkyrie. The name hung in the air, an impossible alien word in the sterile confines of the ER. Dr. Vance stared, his mouth agape. Elena leaned over the general, her voice softening slightly. Stay with me, Marcus. Just stay with me. She straightened up, her transformation complete. The janitor was gone. In her place stood a commander. Get me a fast scanner, she ordered the room at large. I need 6 units of O-negative, warmed, and a full thoracotomy tray on standby. Page cardiothoracic and ortho, stat. We are not moving that rebar until we can see exactly what it's touching. The ER staff, who moments before had been paralyzed by Vance's incompetence, now moved with a new purpose. They responded to the innate authority in her voice, the undeniable expertise in her actions. They didn't know who she was, but they knew she was in charge. Vance finally found his voice. You can't do this. I am the head of this department. You are a janitor. I'll have you arrested. As if on cue, the main doors burst open a second time. A full JSOC tactical team, helmets with integrated comms, NVGs flipped up, and state-of-the-art rifles swarmed the room. They moved like a single organism, securing the area with overwhelming force. Their leader, a master sergeant with a face like a roadmap of every war from the last 20 years, scanned the scene. His eyes locked onto Elena. He immediately snapped to attention, his posture ramrod straight. The salute he rendered was so sharp it seemed to cut the air. Ma'am, Angel 6 is on station. Your extraction team is 5 minutes out. What are your orders? The entire room stared, speechless. Ma'am, orders? The master sergeant then turned his head, his gaze falling upon the sputtering Dr. Vance. His eyes narrowed to slits of pure contempt. You, he growled, stepping into Vance's personal space, you will stand down, and you will follow every single order this woman gives you. You're in the presence of Lieutenant Colonel Elena Petrova, call sign Valkyrie. For 15 years, she was the Tier 1 surgeon attached to Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. She has performed more life-saving surgeries in blacked-out helicopters and mud-brick huts with enemy fire coming through the walls than you've read about in your comfortable air-conditioned journals. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. The man on that table, General Marcus Thorne. He's alive today because 12 years ago she performed a cardiac massage on him through an incision she made with a hunting knife in the middle of a sandstorm in Kandahar after his vehicle hit an IED. She is a legend. She holds the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 silver stars, and 5 bronze stars with valor. She is the angel of the battlefield, and you called her the cleaning lady, so I suggest you get out of her way before I physically remove you. Silence. Absolute deafening silence. Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Miller looked as though they might faint. Their faces were pale with a mixture of terror and profound, soul-crushing shame. They replayed every snide comment, every dismissive chuckle, every moment of casual cruelty. Elena, now fully in her element, paid them no mind. She was already working, directing the combat medics and the now compliant ER staff. Let's get that fast scan. I need to see the pericardium, check for tamponade. Let's get a line in his femoral artery. I need real-time blood pressure. She rolled up the sleeves of her drab gray uniform shirt, and for the first time, everyone saw her arms. They were a tapestry of old scars, the puckered starburst of a shrapnel wound on her forearm, the slick, shiny skin of a burn scar near her elbow, the thin white line of an old knife wound. They were the roadmap of a life lived at the bleeding edge of conflict. They saw the limp for what it was, not the shuffle of old age, but the lasting damage from a piece of metal that had tried and failed to stop her. They understood that the tremor in her hands was not a weakness, but the ghost of 1,000 lives she had held in those very fingers, the physical manifestation of post-traumatic stress that vanished the second she was called back to duty. For the next hour, Elena Petrova conducted a symphony of life-saving. She was a force of nature, her commands precise, her hands steady, her mind 10 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. She stabilized the general with a brilliance that left the hospital's top surgeons who had arrived to assist, watching in humbled awe. When the military transport team finally arrived to airlift the general to Walter Reed, Elena personally oversaw the transfer, her briefing to the flight surgeon a masterclass in trauma medicine. As the helicopter's rotors faded into the night, the ER was left in a state of surreal quiet. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a thick residue of shock and shame. Dr. Vance stood alone in the middle of the room, his world shattered. His authority was gone. His reputation was in ruins. He was no longer the brilliant chief, but the arrogant fool who had almost killed a national hero and had humiliated a living legend. General Thorne's aide, a stern-faced colonel, walked up to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Dr. Vance," he said, his voice cold and sharp as ice. "Your hospital's very lucrative contract with the Department of Defense is now under immediate review. Your actions tonight were a disgrace. You will be hearing from our lawyers." Vance's face turned the color of ash. Sarah Jenkins and Greg Miller approached Elena, their faces streaked with tears. "Doctor, Colonel Petrova," Jenkins stammered. We are so sorry. We had no idea." Elena looked at them, her face weary, the lines of exhaustion returning. The warrior was receding, and the ghost was coming back. "Now you do," she said softly. "See the person, not the uniform, not the job title. See the person." She turned to leave, her work done. Her limp was more pronounced now, the adrenaline no longer masking the old pain. As she reached the automatic doors, the master sergeant called out. "Ma'am," Elena paused. The sergeant and his entire JSOC team, still standing guard, snapped to attention. They delivered a final perfect salute. The sound of their hands striking their chests echoed in the silent ER, a thunderous tribute to the quiet woman in the janitor's uniform. Elena Petrova straightened her shoulders one last time. She didn't return the salute. She simply gave a short, sharp nod of acknowledgement. Then she pushed through the doors and disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, a ghost once more, her duty done.